What is capitalism? It's a financial system. It is not a political system, no matter how often somebody tries to tell you that capitalism is basically democracy. That is not how this works. Democracy is a political system that is not fettered to any specific economic system. Democracy is used in socialist countries like Britain and Germany and France. Democracy, believe it or not, voting for their leadership, it's actually used in communist countries like Russia and Hungary and China. They vote too. I'll bite. So, capitalism is basically the laws of supply and demand, period. Following the laws of supply and demand. And you may absolutely equate it to free trade, right? Okay, so free trade means nothing. No government controls, no socialist framework. That's what those controls are. The SEC, the FDIC, the OSHA, all of these things are federal guardrails to make sure that capitalists don't screw people over. Capitalism at its finest, we know what happens. We already know. It's called the stock market crash of 1929. Unfettered capitalist policies, unfettered law of supply and demand, unfettered free trade creates Gordon Gekko. Greed is good, baby. Simple. And we all know this. And we all know we're not getting there because we all know the other adage. You can't make money without money. The system is designed that way. In a capitalistic financial system, it's designed that way. You can't even get into the game without enough capital, without enough money to start. So capitalism is stacked against you and me no matter what we do. We don't have that kind of money. Nobody is giving us $300,000 to start Amazon. Mommy and Daddy gave that to Jeffy. Yeah. You didn't think that he just popped like a mushroom, did you? Of course you did. So, all these conversations, like what Musk did recently. Twitter. How did he do that? He has that money on paper, but he didn't have it in real life. So he shuffled some stuff around and he got some loans against this paper money that's not paper. It's just on paper. Now imagine hundreds of them, thousands of them doing this all at the same time. That's what happened with the stock market crash in 1929. They were all playing shell games with their money. And they were all playing shell games, more importantly, with yours. Because the banks were basically loaning them your money. Ma and Pop out in Kansas had a couple $100, their life savings in 1929 in a bank that ultimately was related to one on Wall Street. And they had sent all that money to Wall Street so that it could be invested, so they could continue to make a little bit of money, pay you interest, and pay their employees. Gone. Because of all those guys playing the shell game. With the money they had on paper. And it was so devastating that it took, in 3 months' time, it took almost 90% of the companies in the United States of America. Gone. No jobs. No jobs for people. None. People out on the street, starving, can't pay their mortgages, can't pay their rent, can't pay anything, can't buy food. The federal government had to step in. And that's when the federal government started to step away from capitalism and this idea that an unfettered capitalistic society could exist. Because now you had about, something like 7 million people? And 90% of them didn't have a way to feed themselves? The federal government needed to step in. And you could say, oh, well, why couldn't they start new companies? Because there's no capital left. There was no money left. Nobody had any money. Not even the guys that had owned the company had money anymore. They crashed the whole thing. Gone. So the federal government stepped in and created projects like the Hoover Dam and the Golden Gate Bridge. And it did it across the country. And it put people back to work. And it traded on the fact that we were 7 million-ish people and they were going to be able to create more jobs. I could be wrong about that 7 million, but it sticks out in my mind for some reason. And ultimately, they created those jobs. Then they had the Dust Bowl. I mean, Christ, it must have just felt like Armageddon. Because now they can't feed people because there's not enough food growing in the states that we've always counted on for it to grow. But the federal government twisted that in a positive note too, and boom, they created these little kits and they sent people out and they paid them to take soil samples and test these soil samples and send in the results so they could figure out why the land wasn't producing anymore and what they needed to do to make sure that that never happened again. Boom, subsidies for farmers not to farm certain land at certain times. Socialism. That's not capitalism. That's socialist policies and socialist ideas and concepts and framework in order to stop capitalism from destroying the land. FFS. What we have right now is we have people selling you the same bunk that people were sold 100 years ago. Capitalism does not work without being fettered somehow. You always have that one greedy jerk, and you all know him. You all know him. We all know one, at least one. And ultra rich people, fuck, they know 80% of the people they hang around with are like that. For every Mark Cuban, there are 50 Elon Musk. There are 50 of them we can't trust with our money. Even Warren Buffett is more than happy to tell you we cannot trust him with our money. He's happy to tell you and warn you. But you don't see him not supporting some of those organizations that all those ultra rich that want to make sure they screw the rest of us. He still supports all those groups, doesn't he? Mark Cuban probably supports some of them too, but at least, he's trying to figure out how to lower prescription costs and still make a profit. He wants to prove it can be done so that the federal government will fetter these people more. How ridiculous is that? We've got rich people. We've got one rich guy arguing with other rich people on how much they should be able to take care of fellow human beings. That's what we've come down to. And that's what you guys put in that president-elect. We'll talk about P.T. Barnum, I think, next time. But capitalism, we don't have a capitalist society. We haven't had one since the stock market crash in 1929. And we haven't been able to because greed is good and we can't trust them. Period. We just can't. And I know that's sad to say because I like to trust people. I like people. I want to trust people too. I do. I just know that we can't trust people that really aren't good people. And it's not that they didn't start out good people. It's greed is good. Capitalism is nothing but greed. It can't help itself. That's the nature of the beast. Anyway, think about it next time.